My name is Natalia Nosal, and this is my research presentation for PED 345, Childhood Obesity with Dr. Jordan Weber. For my presentation, I'm going to be discussing maternity leave and breastfeeding in the United States versus Japan and its effects on childhood obesity. We're going to begin by watching this short video on breastfeeding.
Let's talk about breastfeeding in terms of trees. Imagine the trunk of the tree is breastfeeding. Breastfeeding is vitally important to supporting good health. It offers many benefits to many people. Let's add some branches to our breastfeeding tree. This branch is baby. This one is mom. This one is family. This is employers. And this one is society. You need these branches to get all the beautiful leaves, right? So what are the benefits? Or, for our purposes here, what are some leads for baby? Leading health organizations strongly advise mothers to give breast milk only to their babies for the first 6 months and continue for at least 1 to 2 years. Babies who are breastfed experience many remarkable health benefits, including less ear, stomach, and respiratory infections, less diarrhea, reduced risks of obesity and diabetes, a stronger immune system, and optimal brain development. And how about for mom? What are some benefits for our mama branch? Breastfeeding promotes an early bond and closeness between mother and child. Breastfeeding mothers experience reduced risks of diabetes, breast and ovarian cancer, less postpartum depression, less cardiovascular disease, and a speedier recovery after childbirth. Families save time and money by choosing to breastfeed. A breastfed child is a healthy child, which means less money spent for medical visits for the family. And a breastfeeding mother is a healthy mother, which means she's back on her feet faster to spend time with the whole family. By supporting breastfeeding in the workplace, employers enjoy higher employee productivity and retention, lower healthcare costs, and less time lost for employees leaving to care for a sick child. Our entire society benefits from breastfeeding. By supporting more breastfeeding, the U.S. economy could save $13 billion a year. We would be taking a huge environmental step forward by reducing the waste involved in the production, packaging, and distribution of formula and bottles. Wow, look at this wonderful canopy of leaves. But wait, we're missing an important part of the tree. We need roots. Without roots, a tree can't survive. There are 6 major groups outlined in the U.S. Surgeon General's call to action to support breastfeeding. Each of these groups can make a huge impact on promoting and encouraging breastfeeding. So, what are the roots that support breastfeeding? Mothers and families to provide the day-to-day support and encouragement. Communities to support breastfeeding without limits or restraints. Healthcare to provide necessary guidance and skilled help. Employment to remove the barriers to successful breastfeeding. Research to expand and deepen our knowledge of breastfeeding and breastfeeding support. And public health infrastructure to lead the nation with a focus on health. As you can see, this breastfeeding tree has a deep, healthy root system of support. So, where are you in this root system? How are you supporting breastfeeding? Because if we want to enjoy this canopy of benefits, then we need more breastfeeding. And if we want more breastfeeding, we need a healthy, vibrant root system. And this lone breastfeeding tree can become an orchard of breastfeeding trees. Get involved. Go to breastfeedla.org. Everyone can help make breastfeeding easier.
As we just watched, there are many benefits to breastfeeding, and not only to the baby. What we're going to be looking at is how we need a strong foundation to promote breastfeeding, and that foundation is going to be employment and how the workplaces in United States versus Japan compare. So breast milk is best for an infant and can lower the chances of obesity. Human milk is more sterile, digestible, and rich in nutrients compared to formula. It adjusts to a baby's age and weight, so the baby is always getting as much as it needs. Even as the baby gets older, it will always have enough, and it's never going to be overfed. It also contains antibodies from the mother, which can protect the child from chronic diseases, and as the video already said, it results in less likely to get allergies, asthma, ear infections, upset stomachs, diabetes, and SID, which is sudden infant death syndrome. It also improves childhood vision, advanced breathing reflexes, stronger jaw, and a higher IQ. Studies also showed that breastfeeding will promote a higher IQ, which means that a child is more likely to graduate from high school and go to college. But what we will be looking at is that decreases the chance of becoming obese or hypertensive before the age of 12. So this is one study I found that focused on the relationship between breastfeeding and postponing the introduction of solid food on children's obesity and healthy weight status at 2 and 4 years old. This was a longitudinal study that was a national representative of U.S. children born in 2001. This assessment followed a child's growth and parental reports of feeding experiences. So there were 3 categories that were compared to assess a child's weight status and early feeding methods. The first category was children who were introduced to solid foods under 4 months old. The second category was children introduced to solid food between 4 and 5 months. And the third was children introduced to solid food over 6 months old. So by comparing 3 of these categories, the study found that in 2 of the categories that breastfeeding and introducing solid food at 4 months was associated with a lower obesity weight and a healthier weight status, while infants who are introduced to solid foods before 3 months had higher levels of obesity at 5 years old. Formula-fed infants who were introduced to solid foods had a higher chance of being overweight at 3, compared to children who were introduced to solid food and formula-fed at 4 to 5 months. So infants who were breastfed, not formula-fed, before 4 months and were introduced solid foods after had no impact on weight status at age 3. The American Academy of Pediatrics recommends that parents solely breastfeed their infants up to 6 months old without the introduction of solid food. After 6 months, parents may introduce solid food, but keep breastfeeding until the infant reaches 12 months. So now we're going to talk a little bit about formula. In the US, nearly 6 in 10 infants are still breastfeeding at 6 months of age, but only 1 in 4 are breastfeeding exclusively. So 3 out of 4 are either formula fed or have some prior introduction to food. I'm going to start off by listing the cons. So the cons of formula is that it lacks the antibodies of breast milk. Formula can't provide a baby with protection from infection and illness like breastfeeding can. So it does not meet the baby's needs as the baby grows older. One of the things that can happen when being formula fed is that parents push the baby to drink the entire bottle. And sometimes it's too much, and that's how a baby can become overweight or obese. If a baby were to breastfeed, it can never be overfed because the baby knows when to stop, kinda. There's a comforting kind of sucking versus a drinking milk sucking, which also can promote self-control later in the future. One of the other cons is the planning and organizing that comes to being formula fed. You have to make sure you have sterile bottles, sterile nipples. You have to make sure you have enough formula. Sometimes you run out, you have to go to the store. So it can be very time consuming. And a baby may have digestive issues, as also explained in the video earlier, and the expense. During the first year, it can cost up to $1,500. However, there are pros if so many people are doing it. It's convenient because anyone can do it. It doesn't have to be the mom, it can be the dad, it could be a caregiver, and it's flexible because a mom doesn't have to be the one to do it or worry about it. She can go back to work, she can go out with her friends. She doesn't need to worry about what's happening to the baby because she doesn't need to feed it. So, also one of the things that's convenient for a mom is she doesn't have to worry about her diet. Alcohol is one thing that can be transmission through breast milk to a baby. So a woman who is not breastfeeding anymore doesn't have to worry about transmitting those things to a baby, but mostly time. A baby does not need to be fed as often when they are formula fed because it is so filling, and mom does not need to pump every 4 hours for 15 to 20 minutes or up to 8 times a day. So it is very, very time consuming to breastfeed, as you see. Newborns drink breast milk every 2 to 3 hours, and 6 months old drink breast milk every 4 to 5 hours. That's a lot. But what is interesting here in this map, I found a correlation between the obesity rates versus the percentage of infants breastfed at 6 months. So as you see on the obesity map, the most prevalence and over 35% of obesity is here in Louisiana, Alabama, Tennessee, and here on this other blue map, you could see that those same states are under 40 to 50% or breastfed, and they have the highest obesity. It's very interesting. Now we're going to compare the United States versus Japan. So here on the right, you could see that this little chart shows the government mandated paid leave for new parents. Japan is pretty high up there. It has over 60 weeks of paid leave, while US is all the way at the bottom. It has 0 weeks of paid leave. So the United States, 72% of moms are either working full or part-time. And the US is the only country amongst 41 nations that does not mandate any paid leave for new parents. However, the Family and Medical Leave Act does enable some employees to take up to 12 weeks, but only 60% of workers are eligible. Some states have their own rules. I'm from Massachusetts and I looked it up and I thought they were going to offer paid leave, paid maternal leave. However, Massachusetts only offers 8 weeks. So that was a little discouraging. And now we look at Japan. Japan offers over a year's worth of paid leave and almost half of all available paid leave for new parents, which is 30 weeks, is set aside for new fathers. And maternity leave is available at 2/3 of a woman's average earnings for 14 weeks, and 6 are required by law. So a woman can go back to work if she wants. However, she could also not go to work. It's her option. And it can be extended up to 14 months if both parents take it. So that's a lot of time spent with a kid. Now, we are going to compare the prevalence of obesity in both United States and Japan in adults and in children. So here on the left, this is the share of adults that are overweight or obese in 2016. This is the most recent one I can find. And as you see, Japan is at 29.4%. However, in the United States, there's a share of 70.2% of adults overweight or obese. So that's quite a difference. And as we look on the right, the share of children who are overweight in Japan is 13.58%, while in the United States, it's 24.03%, which is also a 10% difference. Now, I'm going to discuss some American parental leave. In 1993, Congress passed the Family Medical Leave Act, which required a company with over 40 workers to allow 12 weeks of unpaid parental leave and guarantee the employee their job and equivalent employment benefits and pay. This is still the most current one, but this leave also applies towards taking care of a newborn, a newly adopted child, a spouse, a sick parent or sick child, and if that person themselves is in serious health problems. Employees may be required to use sick or vacation days to cover a portion of that paternal leave. So if you want to extend it, you would have to take vacation days. And which is what is even more wild is that an employer can deny employee leave if the employee is in the highest paid 10% of the workforce because it can create a problem in that business. So if you are high up there like a manager or a CEO of some business and you leave, it can cause a big problem because you're so influential and you might be denied your leave. So that's also crazy. And mothers in the Unit S who return to work within 3 months after childbirth decrease the chances of them breastfeeding by 60 to 18%. And the duration is shortened by 4 to 5 weeks. So she goes in before the 3 months and it's shortened by 4 to 5 weeks. She might be only breastfeeding for those 3 months, which is not what is required. And while we compare the American one to the Japan's parental leave laws, we will find some dramatic differences. This is a little evolution of Japan's parental leave laws. So in 1972, Working Women's Welfare Law requested that employers provide child care leave. And in 1985, Equal Employment Opportunity Law allowed women to work more than 6 hours of overtime per week and allowed women to work 6 weeks before they were due to give birth and then return 6 weeks after. So before this, women weren't allowed to work overtime. They weren't allowed to work after 10 p.m. So women were very restricted in the workforce. However, this EEOL law allowed women a lot more flexibility and opportunity. In 1992, the Child Care and Family Care Leave law allowed employees to take child care leave until the child was 12 months old, sometimes even 18, depending if maybe the child had some kind of problem or the parent had a problem. So this law also allowed Japanese fathers to take paternity leave. 2006, the EEOL was revised and now states that workers should be able to engage in full working lives with respect for maternity in case of women workers, but without discrimination based on the sex for all workers. So this offers protection for women who take maternity or child care leave. It prohibits employers from dismissing a woman or disadvantaging her because of her marriage, pregnancy, childbirth, or for requesting leave for pregnancy or childbirth. And an employer also can't fire a woman during her pregnancy or within 1 year of giving birth. So that's awesome. That's amazing. Um, I have to add that Japan is actually it's one of the countries that has the lowest birth rate right now, and it's because it has a very high population of the elderly people, which I will summarize briefly later on, but it's also infertile. The articles I looked up suggest that it's a cultural kind of influence that the young people aren't ready to get married and settle down, and there's less men who are employed, so that's also adding to why there is such a low birth rate. And this is also why Japan's parental leave laws are so lenient and promoting breastfeeding, promoting women to take maternity leave, and even fathers. So in 2010, the Child Care and Family Care Leave law was revised to reverse the falling birth rate and create a society where both men and women can continue to work while taking care of children and family members. So this allowed parents Well, it allowed fathers to take leave to take a more active role in raising their children. Parents with children can work shorter hours and be exempt from overtime. And if both parents take leave, the period is extended until child reaches a year and 2 months. This is a short-term family care leave system that allows workers to take time off to care for sick or injured family members. So Japan is very family oriented and is promoting child's care, childbirth, everything it can to honestly raise that falling birth rate. So, a little bit about breastfeeding in Japan. In 1990, the World Health Organization announced that babies should exclusively breastfeed until 6 months and then continue with the introduction of food until the child is 2 years old. Based on this recommendation, Japan started promoting and supporting breastfeeding by creating the Support Guide for Breastfeeding and Weaning for medical practitioners to teach patients. In the past 20 years, 60% of working Japanese women quit their jobs because of pregnancy and childcare, and 75% of mothers were not working 1 year after childbirth. That's just a statistic I found. So it just kind of shows that women were spending more time with their child instead of going back into the workplace. They were, raising a kid, they were breastfeeding, they were teaching them. And so breastfeeding initiation does not significantly differ between mothers who return to work within a year after childbirth and those who leave the job after childbirth. But the breastfeeding duration is shorter by 1.654 months for the former group. When fathers work under a flex time system after childbirth, mothers' breastfeeding initiation increases and the duration increases by 4.418 months. So this basically just says that when a woman is supported by her husband, she feels more comfortable to stay at home with the child to breastfeed. And this indicates that when fathers provide assistance and support in early childbearing, it encourages mothers to initiate and continue breastfeeding. So 86.1% of women initiated breastfeeding, and the average duration of breastfeeding is 12 months. The rate of breastfeeding is 86.8% at 3 months, and and the rate of breastfeeding is 76% at 6 months. So they have a very high breastfeeding rate compared to what we saw in America. Oh, and one of the cool things in Japan is that they have a blue zone, which is Okinawa, Japan. Sorry if I butchered that. And so a blue zone is regions of the world where a higher amount of people live longer than average. The world's oldest woman was Nami Tajima at 117 years old, and she was from the southern area of Japan. So the islands at the southern end of Japan have historically been known for longevity, and it was once called the land of immortals. Okinawa has less cancer, heart disease, and dementia than Americans, and women there live longer than any woman on the planet. Some common factors of the blue zones is that the people there have a supportive group of friends, and they have a sense of purpose and a reason to get up in the morning. Ikaji. They also have a plant-based diet. I was reading that they eat a lot of rice, a lot of sweet potatoes, and just a whole bunch of veggies. They also enjoy the sunshine, which promotes vitamin D and stronger bones and healthier bodies. They stay active. One of the activities they liked was gardening. So they plant a medicinal garden with a bunch of herbs such as mugwort, ginger, and turmeric that all have proven medical qualities. And by consuming these every day, they might be protecting themselves from very detrimental illnesses. So what can Americans learn from Japan is, well, first off, we need to definitely enforce at least 6 weeks of paid maternity leave. One of the reasons why American women feel so pressured to go back into the work field is because we're not getting paid. What's the point of staying home when you need to go out there and work to help support your family financially? It is very time consuming to breastfeed, as we saw. and it is a lot easier to just get formula, to have a caregiver such as a grandparent or a sister-in-law, someone who's staying home to take care of the child while you go out there and work. However, a second thing we could do is educate the parents about the importance of breastfeeding and create a supportive foundation to promote breastfeeding. So I'm sure many parents, when they get pregnant, are educated about breastfeeding. However, we need to definitely push the importance of it. It is so important, and it can seriously, as we saw on the maps, decrease the chances of childhood obesity, which will later lead into adulthood. So thank you so much, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation. Bye.